Alright guys, we're on the home stretch to getting this rear end completely done. So for all of you that have been following on, we've gone from every bit of stage of building a rear axle, mostly at home, little help on the outside, but there's nothing I can do about that. So here we are, housing's all painted up, dried, cleared, let that thing sit for a couple of days, stick it out in the sun for a day. Sticking it out in the sun for a day really helps that clear harden up nice. And now we're on to assembly day. So to assemble this rear end, I'm going to put a little asterisk here, a little hashtag warning. I've done all the research I can. I've talked to a couple people. Don't listen to me. I could be all wrong, but I won't know until the car drives. I've talked to a whole lot of people who have assembled plenty of rear ends, and this is what they've told me to do. So you're going to need some tools to accomplish this. You're going to need your basic sockets. I got a 3/4 here, inch and a 1/16, both 1/2 inch. I have a 1/2 inch cordless impact, but I also have a 1/2 inch air gun, because some of these you got to run them down like 100 foot-pounds, but we're not using a crush sleeve, so you won't need to ram these things home. Oh, you don't need a camcorder battery. You're going to need a digital caliper, because you have to measure all your shims. You're going to need a bunch of shim packs, which if you bought the Racestatus kit I got, that came with it. So this is a whole ton of diff shims. This is the factory diff shim. These are shims for the pinion. And if you could see, I measured these, and I wrote on them what they are. Makes it a little bit easier. You're going to need 2 of these pinion nuts. They have a Loctite in them. You probably don't need 2, but you know, these have a Loctite in them, so if you run that once down, the Loctite's gone. So I got 2 of them. Now, important thing here is you're going to need a setup bearing. And what that is it's a bearing that you can slide over your pinion without pressing it. So this bearing sits in here, and this is a press fit on here. So what you do is you get a second bearing for the one. Now, this is where it gets complicated. So the Racestatus kit comes with a coil bearing. Alright, coil part number, you can see it there, and it's M802048-N. Now this is a Timken bearing, which I just recently found out is made in the great country of China. You can't run these 2 bearings. So these 2 races are completely different. The bearings are a little different. So I had a hard time getting a coil bearing. So what I did was I bought 2 Timkens. 2 Timkens bearings, 1 Timken race, because you only need 1 race. So this is a setup bearing. So what I did was, you could see in the inside, I ground that all out until it was just a slip fit on the pinion. You don't want to go too crazy so this thing's slapping around. Alright, well, you got that just enough. You could see shims there. So you want that, because once this is on here, you're done. You're not getting this thing back off without destroying it. And it's good chances that you're not going to set that pinion depth correctly on the first time. So you want the setup bearing so you can put it all together, measure everything, all good, boom, take this off, press on your new bearing, stick it in, you're good to go. You know what to do. So you're going to need your setup bearing. You're also going to need some 80-90 gear oil to put on your bearings. You're going to need an assortment of torque wrenches. Now I have a Snap-on 3/8 digital and a Snap-on 1/2 inch digital. Now you don't have to go out and buy $1,100 worth of torque wrenches or $1,200, whatever those things cost. I do that for, you know, I work on cars for a living, so it was worth the investment for me. But you will need a torque wrench that measures in inch-pounds, so you can see the preload on the pinion bearing, and you will need a 1/2 inch torque wrench to torque down your main caps, which are like 105 foot-pounds or something like that. And you also need a dial indicator. Now I got this one from Matco. It's a decent kit, vice grips. I wish it had the magnetic base, which I'll probably buy, which will probably be easier. But you know, so this thing will be all loose, and you just crank it. Oh, wrong way. And you just crank it, and it's solid. And sweet. Now this was kind of expensive. There are cheaper ones, but when you're buying this, I know this is not the best precision instrument out there, but when you're buying measurement tools like this is not something you want to go to Harbor Freight for. I mean, it's kind of critical because, I mean, you're measuring in the 28 thousandths, 30 thousandths. So if you're out 2 thousandths, that's a pretty significant jump. So there's all the tools you need. Now let's go over what you want to start with. You got your pinion. I've talked to a couple people, and they all say with Ford Motorsports Racing Performance, Ford Performance Racing, whatever the hell they're called, start out with 30,000 shims. So I have a 19 and an 11 in here. Stick those on. Next you want to stick your setup bearing on. Now this right here, you can see it's a little discolored. The coating they put on there made it really hard to fit the outer pinion bearing on. It was actually a really pain in the ass. So I just took some sandpaper, sanded that down. Now I am not using a crush sleeve. What I am using is a crush sleeve spacer instead. And it comes with a whole shim pack. I think I showed you guys this. So one thing I've learned today was, because I've already been playing with this, the more shims you use on this, the looser it will be. Alright, so this thing came with all these shims, and I had 3 shims in there, and it was still pretty loose, and I added 2 more, and it got even looser. So I'm like, oh, hold on. And then I thought about it, and yeah, that makes sense because it's pushing it away from the bearing. The bearing's pushing it away. So I went down to 2 shims, and we're going to see where that is. 2 thin shims. A lot of people say they do this by feel. I'm going to do it via torque wrench, and I think it's supposed to be 10 to 12 foot-pounds of drag. Inch-pounds, I'm sorry. Not foot-pounds, 10 to 12 inch-pounds of drag. 8 to 12, I got it written down. I'm going to look it up again real quick. But so you want to stick your spacer on there, 2 shims. I've already went ahead and installed the races. You can buy a cheap race installer from Harbor Freight. We'll clean them out again. Been sitting for the day now. Take your, I mean, look at that dirt. And that just, they're brand new. And that was just from sitting for the day. And going back and forth touching this thing. So clean your inner one out too. Yeah, so you just pound the shims, the races in with the shim installer. It's not hard. They go a little crooked. It might take you a couple times. But one thing you should definitely have is a brass punch. They work great, and you can punch these back out and start again without damaging the race. So take your pinion, stick that up in there, stick your bearing down and on. Oil slinger, just because it's, you know, pretty much a shim. Stick on your pinion flange, start your nut. Now I'm gonna hit mine with the gun just to see, just to get it seated, kind of. I can already tell it's still way too loose. See if it'll go anymore. See how much difference that changed? See that? See how tight that got? It might be a little too. So what we'll do is we'll put the torque wrench on there and see what that's at. So it's actually like 16 to 28 inch pounds. You got your pinion in there. There she is. Now you got to put your diff in next and try to set your don't mind me, I can't think of all the terms right now, but you need to set the diff from left to right. And how you do that is with more shims. Also, another note, when you take your bearing caps out, you want to mark them, make sure they're on the right side. This one, I don't know if you can really see it, 2 punch marks. 2 punch marks in the housing. 1 punch mark, granted you don't need to do both sides, but 1 punch mark, and they got arrows, you want to face them out. Take your spool, diff, whatever you're using, keep your bearing caps on. This is a shitty spot. I don't like doing this. I've already hurt myself, but try not to get your fingers stuck in there. Get a little gap and try to get your bearing cap straight. A couple of shims. Whoop. Drop it in. Drop it in. Have a little, where is it? Alright, so you got some shims in there, shims, diffs sitting in there. I'm going to take your caps. These are supposed to be torqued to 100 foot-pounds, I believe. 105. I'm obviously not torquing those in just yet. That thing's all locked up, so obviously we are too deep. Alright, so we're getting somewhere. So you can hear this. That is way too much on that gear. That's probably like 30 thousandths or so. I'm going to double check what it needs to be again. Okay, so you want your backlash to be set right around 8. I think it's about 8. I think spec is 8 to 12 thousandths is spec. That sounds about. I think that I just double checked, and that's where it was. What my little book said. Just on the verge of 12 thousandths. Oh no, I'm gonna try to bring you guys in closer. $11 and a half. You want to decrease backlash, so we're gonna, give me a minute, we're gonna take out of here and add to here, I believe. Take out of here, add to here. I gotta double check my book. Yeah, so I was right. So we're gonna remove shims from this side and add them to this side to decrease our backlash, and it's so minute. Yeah, a little chew on the paint, never hurt no one. probably too tight. So now that you have your backlash set, 10,000s, now that you have your pinion preload set, the next thing to do is see the gear pattern. Now they come with this little bit of shit paint. You see it there. Take a brush, put it on the toe side, put it on the heel side, couple of teeth. You don't have to go crazy. We're going to find out right here. Now, I'm no expert, but I have a funny feeling that my pinion depth is too deep. And it almost completely cleans the backside. So after much trial and error, I've got the pinion set, I got the bearing preloaded, and I got the backlash set. So I'm at like 9.5 thousandths ish, which is perfect because it's right between 8 and 10. 8 and 12, I'm sorry. So I finally wrote down the numbers. You want your preload to 16 and 28 inch-pounds and your backlash 8 to 10 thousandths. I have a 30,000 shim under the bearing head, in between the bearing. So now we're going to paint the gears and this out of here. We're going to paint the gears and see our our gear pattern. And then rotate it over on your pinion, back and forth. Make sure you get a good thing. And there's your gear pattern. Mine doesn't look too bad. Now there's so many acceptable gear patterns to use that it's kind of hard to see the light. It's really hard to see. Everybody will say to run that. A lot of my friends told me to run that. So, we're going to run it, and we're going to see what happens. So now, pull this all back apart, make sure to keep my shim packs all separate, and I got to pull the pinion back out, bring it to work, press on the good bearing. I mean, there's ways around that. You can, I've seen people put it on a piece of steel plate and torch it from the bottom, put the pinion in the freezer, but I got to press at work, so that shit's, I'll do it the right way. Slam it all back together, get it in, get the axles in it. I still got to get 3/8 hardware for my brake ends, and then this rear end will be done. My bearings should be here soon, and that'll be that. This was a lot of trial and error. It's literally shim to side, shim to side, shim to side, back, forth, back, forth, back, forth, torque, 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 torque. I mean, it is trial and error. I can't give you a measurement as they will all be the same or all be different. I brought the pinion to work today and pressed the other bearing on. So that, ooh, just lost how sharp those teeth are. That's on there now. That's the one I didn't grind apart for the setup. So we're gonna do final assembly on this thing now. And there's a couple extra little things you got to do before you do that. So we're gonna do that now. You want to make sure your whole bearing race, everything is nice and clean. Stick your bearing in. Give it a little oil love here. We get your oil slinger. I'm not sure how this is an oil slinger. I think it just hits the bearing and slides down. Throw that in. Now it's time to put your pinion seal in. This is where most leaks are on an 8.8. So you want to make sure you're doing this nice and right. So it looks like it has some sort of thing on it to help seat it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of oil actually on the rubber part of this. So now you got to stick your spacer back in with the right shims. A little oil on this bearing. So you don't want to start spinning these things fucking dry. And you can hear the difference right away once you get some oil on it. Alright, stick this bad boy in there. This is what. Now it's the last time. That torque wrench, if you got one like this. There you go. It's done. Oh, here's a little piece for anybody with a digital torque wrench. After every single time, take your batteries out. I had a buddy who had one of these. Now, mind you, this thing's like $700 for the half-inch. I think it's $650, $700 now. Left his batteries in it. Didn't use it for 6-8 months. One of the batteries exploded. Throw the whole wrench in the garbage. It was done. Trick flow cover here. It's a nice cover. It's got the studs that push onto the caps, so it prevents movement. It comes with some nice magnetic drain plugs, and that's some ARP hardware for it. So there's a bunch of schools of thought on how people seal this. A lot of people will just put RTV, slam it on, call it a day, comes with a gasket. I mean, there's obviously a gasket for a reason. So what I do with stuff like this is I use a product mainly because I work for Honda and I know it's great. So I use Honda Bond. This is a damn good high temp silicone liquid gasket, permanent, whatever you want to call it, but this stuff is damn good. So I've had a couple tubes left over from my last car, and we're going to use it on that. Bottom of the door.
Did you start the grill?
Yes. Yes, I did.
Good, because I'm going to start soon.
What else? What are we making with it?
I already made salads.
What else are we making with it?
Salads was my plan. Would you like corn?
Broccoli.
Do I have broccoli?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to need you to cook this now. It smells delicious.
This is probably overkill. A lot of people probably disagree with me on this, but you know what? I seal up oil pans all the time, and none of my shit leaks. So, do what works for you. How's that sound? This works for me. And I don't plan on having this rear end cover off all that often for it to be a problem. And once this stuff dries, you can literally take a razor knife to it and it comes right off. I use the aluminum brush kit that goes on my whiz wheel, and it tears this stuff off like it's nothing. So I don't worry about it. For my buddy Doug, Motion Raceworks, he was ragging on me the other day for no ARP. There you go, Doug. There's my ARP. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up some of that base coat. I'm going to paint the Trick Flow lettering on here. I think that would look pretty cool. Okay, so the problem I was having was my stupidity again. This goes on the outside, this goes against the axle flange. I had them backwards and it was sucking in on each other and it wasn't right. I went over this before. Do you think I remember this before? No. But got it all figured out, taken care of. That hole makes this job not as bad, because if you didn't have that hole, you'd be doing this all by a wrench. Now, this is all set. The only thing I got to do is put the two brake line clamps on the back side here. It scratched my paint. I thought this was off of it more. So when I go to paint these Trick Flow letters, I'm going to touch up that one spot, and I got to put the fitting in for my vent. Brake pads, I'm going to cut my rotors tomorrow. Finishing lines is going to make my brake lines. And this is done, 100%. This is going back in the car hopefully in the next week or so, hopefully in the next week. I forgot to order my upper spherical bearings for the control arms. Completely spaced it. Didn't even think about it, so I gotta order those. I'm gonna order those tomorrow, so those won't be here. They'll probably be here Monday, Tuesday. I'm gonna try to sling this thing in next week sometime. I mean, it's fucking heavy now. Definitely gonna be a 2-3 person job to get this pig in there. I need just another person to get it off the fucking bench, but it's done. Guys, get out in the garage, grab a cold one, crack that bitch, get to working on your hot rod, and let's make some progress, alright? Have a good night, guys.